I would like to share in this episode about a challenge that was very significant in my life. It was a time when I wasn't able to sleep during 4 years, basically suffering insomnia during my late teens and early adulthood, and share the journey that I've gone through from not being able to sleep for a long period of time to gratefully enjoying peaceful sleep in most nights in this day and age. So that if you happen to be in the middle of this challenge, those thoughts may resonate and some of them may be helpful for you. So I leave that for you to judge, but thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Otso Lahtinen, and this is the Deep End podcast. My story regarding insomnia started when I was about 19 years old. I had basically slept literally like a baby my entire life until I was preparing for an intense exam in a high school matriculation in my home country back then, and had done a high dose of caffeine and combined to stress that clearly was new thing for my nervous system. Life had not been very stressful in that way up until that point in time. So somehow that combination accumulated into me not being able to sleep before that examination. And I remember feeling very numb, and I remember feeling quite confused, and I remember not really knowing what's happening when I went into that and had it in the back of my mind. And I also don't think I performed as well as I could have in that. Afterwards, the stress went down and I went back to my normal routines, and then the sleep returned until a couple of months later when I started to really get several nights in a row where I just felt tense in the evening, suddenly wasn't able to sleep, and got into this like Ferris wheel of thinking that during the day start to wonder, am I going to sleep in the evening? What's the night going to be like? How am I going to survive tomorrow? Why am I not sleeping, and how can I sleep better? So all these kind of thoughts and emotions, and without really understanding what was going on. And I wasn't even able to name all those. It was just like all kind of happening because I was so used to sleeping and living. So that sort of became a cycle. And it took very many weeks. It was around, I think, Christmas 2008. It took many weeks to get hang of sleep, and it was terrifying at the time. The period that then followed consisted of me feeling like I struggle during the evening and during the daytime, but still remaining solution oriented and trying to find ways to understand what's happening, and then try to stay consistent to habits that I had at the time, and then I started to introduce through the discoveries that I did as trying to understand what was going on and trying to solve it, then new habits and persisting with those. So it was like a trial and error process, which then coincided with a very busy period in my life, which I was very grateful for, but of studies and working and exploring life and youth and all fun things out there. So it was a lot ongoing, and this insomnia struggle was kind of overlaying it, the whole thing, for a period of several years, and it was quite worrying for quite a long time. Quite many months I was like quite worried about this because I wasn't able to really explain why it happened. And of course then you had gotten used to going to doctor when you were a kid. You go to doctor and you get diagnosis if you have a flu, for example, and they give you antibiotics or whatever. So that's what I did. As one of the first things I did, I went to a doctor, and the doctor I saw gave me sleeping pills, and I tried those. Okay, I tried them temporarily. They gave me sleep, and I have nothing against sleeping pills. I think well used, they can possibly break the cycle, and I'm sure they can add value. But then it kind of felt like I still had the fear, I still had the uncertainty, and instead of understanding what's happening to me or having a long-lasting way forward, I felt like my self-confidence was moving slowly into this small box of pills that whenever I started to feel uncertain, I needed to take it. And then ultimately that led into an experience that even though I took it, I wasn't still able to sleep. And I had this weird taste in my mouth and like these like really bizarre, like surface level, like visions and dreams, not like hallucinations or anything, but like you're like the normal like cycle that you're running enhanced with this something that's going on in your nervous system caused by this medicine. So then I had that for like maybe 3 or 4 months on off until I went to a Tony Robbins event and vividly remember where he was describing how taking pills for something like this can be good, but it doesn't solve the root cause. So that's when I decided that I will remove the pills from my life and I will find a way. I'll continue to find a way to identify what's causing this and exist with myself in a way that I can sleep. Find a way of living, and that's ultimately then took about 3 years for me to go through on off sleeping most of the time, struggling to sleep, especially when there was anything stressful. But it gave me it sort of awoke me to this lifelong quest of spiritual search for meaning and for the true nature of life and asking questions like, who am I? And I continued iterating until finally I managed to find a way to live that enabled me to sleep again. Some of the things that helped me during this journey of several years, the core aspects that I discovered, perhaps start from this paradox that I already alluded to slightly, in that you go to sleep. Normally, you go to sleep, you don't really think about it, and then you um, calm down, and something happens. You doze off. There's plenty of literature to explain that phenomenon. You kind of transcend into this semi state of being awake and being asleep, and the sleep just takes you. Whenever there is disruption, I find, then you go to bed and you start to wait for the sleep, like actively wait for the sleep and focus on it quite a lot, try to make it happen like you used to perhaps making happen things during the day. So it becomes a task or an activity, which is potentially paradoxical, as falling asleep, I find throughout this, is more about letting go and surrendering to the present moment. If you have thoughts, letting those flow, internal emotions, if possible, letting those flow, and whatever other bodily sensations ongoing. With especially, it's a paradox because you need to kind of, in my experience in that moment, focus on um, sleeping rather than not sleeping, and certainly not focusing too much on tomorrow. But then, for especially a I've been always having a sensitive nervous system. I have discovered throughout this process of inquiry. So for a person with sensitive nervous system, like in my case, I often think about the following events. I care a lot and I get nervous before, like whether in business I have a big speech or big negotiation or whatever the case may be. So I get a lot of butterflies, if you will. So these butterflies are, I think, they're a gift and a blessing, and they can be very useful. But then they can show up when you are very tired and possibly in a low state in the evening, trying to get to sleep, which then leads into this thinking that what if I don't sleep tomorrow? How can I cope? How can I find energy? And in some ways, if you break down what happens when you do fall asleep, that you just go there and then you give yourself into the present moment and it just takes you away. So you almost give out all control in that moment. And it's really difficult. It can be really challenging in that moment when you want to sleep so bad and you are so tired, to accept and let it go and give yourself permission to be tired next day if you can't find a way to sleep. Part of that, in my experience of wanting to stay in control in that moment and really wanting to sleep, had to do, at least in my case, with fear of losing control. I was afraid that the following day, if I can't sleep and if this continues, then your mind starts to project like many nights of negative images. So what happens if I can't sleep for 5 nights or 7 nights or 10 nights? That is, and then ultimately you think that I'm going to lose control of my life and something horrible is going to happen. And so that led into thinking of or asking these questions, that what do I actually control? That can I control falling asleep? Can I control my heart beating? Can I control the thoughts that come to my head? From the standpoint of a separate individual human being, of course you can seemingly control your thoughts, but then can you really, if you can control your thoughts, can you stop thinking right now for 10 minutes or 1 minute, or think only positive thoughts for the rest of your life? That's what I at least try to do actively on a daily basis. But if you really investigate, there's not so many things that we directly control. And maybe falling asleep, just as a hypothesis, is one of them. And that was very helpful. It created a lot of air around this, a lot of space around this anxiety that I felt during falling asleep, when I started to look at what do I actually control, and periodically get these glimpses that maybe it just happens to me and I need to trust the grace of the universe and let it happen. Also, it was helpful to read one of the books that greatly resonated was Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. It created a lot of space again around this moment, when the essence of the book is basically to focus on the present moment, because that's all we ever have. And nothing that dangerous can come to the now, if you think, or nothing that terrifying, if you really think this moment right here. So there's no future, there is no past. These are imagination. Past is memories in your mind, and future is projections of hypothetical scenarios that may or may not happen. And that obviously helped a lot in those moments where sleep was seemingly hard to reach. And of course, then another sort of key takeaway or key topic from this journey, before going to the practicalities, was that what is the meaning that you give to things? Because initially, when you lose sleep, at least in my experience, it feels very unjust when you don't understand. So you're used to understanding cause and effect. At least I was used to understanding that if I've been outside without clothes, I might get a sore throat and a fever. But then I wasn't really able to put together that stress and maybe excessive use of alcohol and being sometimes around toxic people would deprive me the ability to sleep. So it felt very unjust, and it felt almost like punishment, that I am this young person who is supposed to be out there sowing my oats, as they say, and experiencing the world. And suddenly I lose what I thought was, and what it feels like at first, that you lose the foundation to live. And that's what your brain's telling me, that I can't do anything, I can't do this, I can't do that. So what about this? What about that? So it feels very unjust, it feels uncertain, it feels fearful. So it's very easy to give a negative meaning to it, like it's a bad, misfortunate event, or if you are religious, you might say that it's a punishment from God. I think my first meaning was that it's very like unfair and unfortunate event for myself, which I need to get rid of. And of course, the harder you try to get rid of something, the whatever resist, it persists. If you push something, it tends to push back. So if you try to make an insomnia a thing and you push it out, it tends to push back. And as long as you treat it as a negative guest and have a baseball bat behind your back and try to like whip it out almost, or bat it out, I found that it was very difficult to create space and try to understand what's actually happening. So it was such a multifaceted thing in essence. So let's explore some of the practical methods that helped me to improve sleep during this period of struggle that I had. I remember around the time when I started to experience these symptoms, first maybe 6 months in, it was time in my home country to go to attend military. So I did 6 months in the military, and it was a vivid change in the sleeping pattern. I went in still unknown, uncertain, and fearful of what might happen in there, as I wasn't able to consistently sleep. And I knew that there would be the peer pressure and people around looking, and you had to go. It's legal requirement. There's no way out of it. You can choose other form of service, but you need to be basically sleeping with other people in a room for at least 6 months. And that was really uncomfortable in the beginning. After about 3 days, it felt like, how am I going to get through this? But then something happened. The sleep really came back, and I slept like a baby throughout most of it. And the reason was that there was the army rhythm. Every morning you get up smack at 6 o'clock, like on point, and you go to bed at 10 p.m. Very obvious thing, but hard to administer, at least it was in my life at the time, especially when you have a lot of things ongoing and you don't place priority to it. So when it was like essentially forced on me gently or imposed, like army runs like that. There's nothing wrong. It's the way they're supposed to run it like that. So it was a big lesson and a good learning for further life to adopt that rhythm as much as possible and as much as allowable by the daily rhythm and daily schedule. So that's been a big thing. And some of the, if you want to go deeper into that fine tuning, if time and space allows, it would be ideal to have whatever amount of time you want to sleep plus 2 hours in bed, so that you don't have to feel this worry and anxiety that what if it takes me 2 hours longer to fall asleep? Okay, I still have 8 hours to be in bed. So you make like a 10-hour window for your resting. I understand that that's practically impossible for most people, including myself, but whenever I grant that for myself and do it in a consistent way, that can create beautiful results. Of course, provided that I can take care of other things in my life that are happening in parallel, so it won't be, so that the sleep window doesn't become the number one thing to achieve, because there's many things. But that was very helpful, and even though it sounds very obvious, hard to implement with discipline consistently. The other thing, training. Because I wasn't actively, I was going to gym a few times a week at the time, but then I later on adopted a training rhythm, especially in the morning, with often high intensity. Short training, 20-30 minutes, maybe 7 out of 10 or higher if you rate the intensity of the training. And notice that if you do a training session like that, it often resets your nervous system and you feel much more energized. And there's, I believe nowadays, a lot of studies as well that show that it's the small dose with high intensity tends to be more valuable than a very long medium intensity dose in very many ways of exercising. And I certainly can attest to that based on my own experience. The challenge with that approach is that it's very easy to then become addicted to sleeping little. If you notice that, okay, I can stay up very late and do a lot of things and then sleep only 4 hours, even that might be patchy, and then I just have a Red Bull and go to do a high intensity workout. So seemingly by about 9 a.m. you'll be okay, and you might be even feeling periodically fresh and driving forward. But then the consequences will come towards the afternoon when you notice that your everything starts to crash, and then you need to compensate with, often I did more caffeine. And then when you keep doing that and try to train harder and harder in the morning, then of course your recovery will get lesser and lesser if you use Whoop or other. It might show that you are in red, and that then adds on top the seemingly good solution overused, in my case added, and became actually a hindrance. So then I did a lot of self-inquiry on this and found out that there's a thing called stress recovery cycle. So you have to little bit think, maybe not analytically, but intentionally, that what sort of stress are you putting yourself through? That are you constantly stressed and doing long days with little breaks at work, and then on top of that you've got some social situations that may be stressful, perhaps some negative people in your life, and then you sleep poorly, consume a lot of caffeine, and notice that your, for example, heart rate in the morning starts to be quicker, and you feel like you can't necessarily feel your emotions anymore because you are constantly so caffeinated, and so in that. So then I learned that it's useful to try to listen to your body as often as possible and adjust the intensity of the training specifically to the amount of recovery that you've had. So if you've had a decent night, then you can go harder. If you've had multiple lower nights, of course you can still go harder, but I became more cautious that sometimes I allowed myself to have just a flow workout, half an hour of treadmill at any pace and listening to good music without like intentionally pushing it. And that self-listening component, really, I think it applies to whole life, because your body has all the knowledge, I believe. It's just we are often too stressed and too clogged to listen to it. And certainly I was. And that was one of the big reasons why this issue continued to persist, because I continued to like ram into too much stuff, and my nervous system continued to stay a little bit stuck. And it's hard to accept. And actually the paradox that you think that you get less done if you let go a little bit and give yourself space and be a bit more gentle. I think I've gotten multiples more done after I've learned more of that. I'm saying that I have anyway mastered it, but I feel like I've made progress because I'm able to do more with less effort and energy than previously, and I feel happier and more rested and more relaxed than, for example, 10 or 15 years ago. That's my measure on evaluating myself. And the some of the other practical points of the stress and recovery cycle, obviously hydration and nutrition. So if you eat very heavily and don't drink that much or consume a lot of electrolytes, that will decrease your ability to recover with many other things. The quality of the stress, I shortly alluded to that. You could have your own podcast or series of podcasts on that topic alone, but in brief, again from experience, this concept of, I guess, good stress versus toxic stress. In my case, good stress prepares me for an event in the future that I want to go well, as long as it comes within moderation. If I have 10 of those on top of each other and they are all happening at the same time, and that may be too much. So it's finding those individual limits of how much good stress can you take, and I think you can adjust those by living differently and practicing different type of habits. Toxic stress is when something inside of you possibly is misaligned. For example, if you feel like you need to be at home taking care of a baby, and at the same time you want to build a company, and you feel like you need to be in both places at the same time, that can really, in my experience, tear an individual apart. I've been blessed in having a clear path and goal in front of me that has always like felt natural, but I recognize that that may not always be the case, and the conflicts like that can really impact your stress recovery cycle, and insomnia can be a sign to look into that. It's often a call to look into a present moment to find out what is life trying to, and my body trying to tell me to, what do I need to pay attention to right now? Is there an unmade decision? Am I living in a great value conflict? Do I need to change my identity? there's a lot of big themes like that. In my case, it was perhaps learning to live in accordance with what my nervous system requires. That's perhaps the big theme going through all these things, giving myself space and being loving and investigating the true nature of life, whilst trying to joyfully create and achieve what I want in business and in life. Like a little bit less pressing, a little bit less squeezing, and a little bit more flowing. Like I've tried surfing a couple of times, or surfing like behind a boat, or being on a board. It requires, like, you really have to let go and embrace the wave if you've ever tried that. It's find a very similar thing that optimally can happen in life. Sometimes when you have those like good moments or good days when things really flow, or you are in a flow state, it's kind of like surfing on a wave, very sensitive and very enjoyable and very, very smooth flowing. And that's ultimately enables great sleep when you the more you can be in those type of states. That's stating the obvious. On the practical notes, also I learned to, as mentioned, eat lightly and eat much more protein heavy foods, much less carbs. I think high quality, high octane carbs are very important, but not sugars necessarily, hard sugars and other things. Generally hydrating more and going to bed earlier, making the room dimmer, dimming the lights beforehand. And often I found that if there is, and also I use that when I travel to different time zones, training resets your bodily clock very, very effectively. So straight away from plane to do training, and then no carbs after 12 o'clock. And then in the evening, when you go to bed at 9 p.m., you take 3 milligrams of melatonin. Your body produces it anyway. So you enhance that temporarily when you need to change time zone or break a cycle of not being able to sleep. And then tell your brain essentially that I am able to sleep beautifully until in the morning without interruptions, and the sleep's going to vitalize my body and improve my functions and refresh my brain so that I can be the best version of myself tomorrow. And then thinking something that I'm deeply grateful for, and try to really feel it in my body and in my heart that I'm grateful for, whatever the case may be, my family, etc. Whatever you might be grateful for in that moment. So those kind of things can also help and have helped me to overcome and improve the quality of the sleep. Screens off, obviously, and lights down, as mentioned. The light from cell phones is not great for sleeping. And then breathing, very underrated. But whenever you get stressed, how does your breathing change? Is it deep or shallow? It's probably very shallow, at least in my case. So when you feel like you have difficulty in the evening and your mind is running, what I have started to do throughout this journey is to breathe maybe 4 breaths in and 6 breaths out for 5 minutes. That long out breath will activate your vagus nerve, which creates relaxation in your nervous system. It makes your nervous system calm down, which is necessary for you to be able to physical level sleep. And whenever that can be done, I find that's a useful thing to do anytime when there is intense emotions or stress during the day. Breathing like that can tremendously help. And there's a lot of science about that as well. Many other breathing techniques too, but it's especially, I understand, the long breathing out that can help tremendously. Caffeine can be a great ally in breaking out of this, and in life in general. I think the world mostly moves on caffeine, so that's obviously great, and there are studies that it can be healthy for you. However, when you are going through intense insomnia, which may be caused by anxiety or your life, how you live your life being in misalignment with what your body and your mind require, or if you have these value conflicts, other things, what it tends to do also, it it can make it harder for you to hear the messages of your body, especially if you use it excessively like I used to use, and you easily use when you are not sleeping, because caffeine is the easiest thing to do to compensate. You go from 100 milligrams, which is like 1 cup of coffee, to 2 cups and 4 and 7. And some people, by the way, are completely immune to this. So lucky you. I can't say the same. Has had a huge, even small increases have huge impacts. And when you are in it, you become also like a little bit numb on your own nervous system. You don't notice how big of an impact it can have on you. And suddenly you can be in this like dark pipeline that's, or gray, not necessarily dark, but gray pipeline that's just filled of doing individual tasks and cleaning your email box and whatever the case might be. And when you get up, when you then give yourself a chance to relax, time off, and get off that caffeine, of course you have withdrawal symptoms, but then you start to notice that the trees become greener and you start to experience emotions in a whole different way, and there's some like vivid things that happen inside of you. So it's a strong recommendation to reduce, or if not eliminate entirely, caffeine from your diet if you have an insomnia, even though it may really be challenging at first. But it turns out that it really isn't. It will help to listen to yourself more, and possibly will help to deal with identify what the issues may be that you have internally. And also it's physically harder to stay awake day after day if you don't use any stimulants. Like your body will just put yourself to sleep at some point when you get tired enough. So that's I think there's like in some Western there was a saying that if you can't sleep, you are not tired enough. That's and I understand that from like if you are a cowboy and you sleep by the fire in the outside in the wilderness, that's like a pretty hard place to, not when you're so in touch with nature. Imagine not sleeping there is quite hard if you have a warm tent and things. So that's perhaps a bit of a side note, but caffeine definitely does not aid in large quantities the sleep quality. That's again stating the very obvious but difficult one to implement, at least in my case, since I have given up or gone to only very micro doses of caffeine, and it has greatly increased the quality of my life. After the first 4 weeks, that was horrible. So brace yourself if you try. Some people have it easy as well, by the way. Then less alcohol. Back in those days, I was mega consuming caffeine and mega consuming alcohol and had no rhythm and had a lot of stress. And obviously the angst of a young man growing up with high ambition to achieve and self-confidence issues and all kinds of other things that you can experience when you're growing up, and also older you can experience, but especially when I was growing up back then, those things were prevalent. So then when you mix alcohol into the mix and then think that why am I not sleeping, because alcohol is a depressant. If you look at there's plenty of evidence and you can feel it in yourself. It can obviously bring you a lot of joy in the moment, and we've had great moments when you drink time to time with pals and you think and remember. So I'm not like anti-alcohol or anti-caffeine, but from the standpoint of trying to regain balance if you have sleeping issues, strongly consider to moderate or again eliminate for a period of time and see what happens. Of course, then you have to find other ways of creating feeling of positivity in your brain, but there are other tools for that which can be adopted. Obviously, going back to the like how can you then some of the other ways to calm nervous system that has been very helpful for me and I continue to use: cold plunge, boy do I love those, and sauna. The combination almost guarantee, kind of like the 7 out of 10 workouts, again works up to a point, but if you have like multiple days of nights that you haven't been able to sleep and you go to a 4 degrees Celsius or 40 degree Fahrenheit water plunge, 10, 20, 30 seconds, and then you go to sauna, which is maybe 80 degrees centigrade and however many Fahrenheit that converts to, and do that cycle maybe 5 times or 6 times. I think it's going to be quite hard to not sleep after that, especially you do it in the afternoon and you haven't caffeinated yourself to submission before that. So highly recommend. Very, very beneficial. Might get some getting used to if and so, but nowadays there's plenty of saunas and plenty of cold plunges available all over the world. Another thing, when you want to achieve a lot and get a lot done, it tends to, at least in my case, lead into overestimating what you can do in a year and underestimating what you can do in a decade. And that shows up in, like, if you look at my calendar in 2000 and in those years, especially still sometimes today, but especially back then, it's like back to 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 back, no breaks. Like, why would I keep breaks? That type of thing. I'll just have more caffeine if there is an issue. Basically, that was like unconscious choice. I wouldn't consciously choose that, but I just wanted to get so many things done, and I felt like so compelled to do it for good reasons. And so, learning to pace myself and accept that, again, like, there is one energy that I have. Better to use the natural energy systems, and within the boundaries of those, prioritize like your life depends on it, and do the things that are important. You have always our urgent stuff that needs to be done too, so you kind of have to understand that too. And it's challenging in scheduling, and I understand. And for anyone who owns or is running a company or entrepreneur or in any other profession that requires a lot of calendar management and can have a lot of predictable and unpredictable events happening at the same time, this is a known challenge. How to get most done whilst maintaining your energy level. So in practical terms, scheduling some small breaks, like especially now in online meeting world, it's easy to do back to back. But if you have a 15-minute break after each meeting and limit the meetings maybe to in 4-hour blocks maximum, sometimes 2 hours, sometimes 4 hours, 2 hours would be optimum, and then 1 hour break. And if you need to do multiple of those a day, the breaks, the more you have those breaks, then the easier your brains to recover. And I find the less you wake up in the night. Nowadays, if I wake up in the night, it's a sign that I haven't given myself enough space during the day. I instantly know this because I wake up and my brain's going through what happened in that meeting, or what did some one person say, and we had that debate, or how did that feel like, and all that. So it was like it's been a really, really great to adopt a bit more relaxed calendar management in that way. And then, of course, you have the people around you. When you're going through a challenge, regardless of how you frame it, the likelihood that the people around you will frame your not sleeping positively is, you have some very great people if they will see that immediately as a positive challenge of life, and they will support you that way. The reaction that you easily get, and this is not, I'm not saying I had great support from the people around me, so I'm not saying that anyone was doing anything that I didn't think was positive, and I really appreciated all that support. It would help if there would be a framing from myself to the people, because they don't, if you haven't been through insomnia, it's not something you want to imagine, and it's not something you probably can imagine, and it's not like, most people will just not have any concept of what it's like, for understandable reasons. Why would you want to get into suffering if you don't have to? And so that's when they come from a good place and ask, for example, in the morning when you had ninth night of not sleeping, ninth time they come to you in the kitchen and ask, darling, how did you sleep? It comes from a very good place, but it can be very painful to reply that question in that moment, because you want to scream because you are so frustrated that you don't know what's happening. And then of course there maybe like fear that raises in, because it's very uncertain and unknown for you, so it of course is like that for other people as well. So the more you can share in a positive way that, dear loved ones, I've got this challenging period in my life I'm going through, and this is just an example, I didn't even do this ever, I'm just like spitballing now, but I think I would say something like this if I went through it, that I'm going through this now, please, I love you very much, please give me space, especially in the morning or around sleep time, and kindly respect that sleep may be a bit touchy topic for me during this period, because I'm literally finding ways to approach it in a new way because of the challenge that life has given me. Something along those lines, so that the conflict doesn't have to happen every day. So a lot of those things are possible to do with relatively small effort on a daily basis. Many of those things are a matter of discipline, matter of adopting better micro habits on daily basis. Then of course there are other things that can be done, and I did, that require more effort and more intentional focus to perhaps learn a new skill or to do more deep discovery. One of them was acupuncture, because when you are in those cycles of not being able to sleep, it's essential to find some way to break the cycle. We went through several of them, and there are many, many others that we haven't covered, and there may be others that obviously you have. But I went to this Ayurvedic doctor who recommended to do Ayurvedic treatments and then recommended to do acupuncture, Chinese acupuncture. And I found this practitioner who had 50 years of experience and was available for any normal public. No like super exclusive. You have these type of practitioners in every city who have a lot of experience in Chinese acupuncture, and they've got a lot of loyal clients and have made seeming even miracles happen if you talk to the clients, and there's this almost urban legends that they cured this and this and that. So that was the kind of guy I went to see, and he put the needles on me, and I like within 3 minutes fell asleep. So that became a nice habit. To whenever I was like struggling, I went there once a week, once every 2 weeks during the time when it was most intense, without doing any other fixes. So I was doing caffeine and doing alcohol and sometimes doing too much sport and late nights and inconsistent rhythm, but I was able to move forward because I knew that whenever I go there, it's going to be able to, the acupuncture is going to help me to fall asleep, and then I will be able to continue. So as an aid, doesn't solve the root cause, but as a natural sleep medicine, calms your nervous system, no consequences that the pills have. Okay, you have to go there to do it, so in that way you're also positively addicted, but I preferred that. That was really helpful. Then in that spiritual sense, when looking into the really into the present moment and what's going on right now inside of you, and understanding how you can calm your mind and your nervous system, transcendental meditation was very helpful. And it's basically 20-minute meditation where you have a voice that the sound that they teach you, that you repeat to yourself, and that sound transcends your mind into what they call a transcendental state. It's the similar state in between sleep and being awake, and it creates deep rest and calmness for your nervous system if you practice it consistently. It helped me a lot during this period. It was one of the cornerstones in creating rhythm and creating space around my thoughts during that moment in the evening when you are facing the choice to either surrender to sleep or try to force it. Meditation created greatly space around that thought and those emotions. Therapy, any form of therapy is, I think, can be useful if you have a right therapist. Often there are things that have happened in your life that may have caused emotions that you may not have dealt with. Certainly was the case with me. A lot of emotion that I hadn't expressed as a child, and talking to therapists made it helpful to express things that I haven't said, and starting to understand that I actually experience emotions and give the emotions names, and also regulate them and let them come and go, and understand that there's nothing wrong also with having, and understand that there's it's worth, there's value in experiencing them and understanding them. That is because there was a lot of these times I was just trying to push them aside just to move forward and plow forward. That's very easy to do, and at least it was for me. So therapy, right, with the right therapist, can create a lot of space long term. But I underscored the word right, and that's not such a simple thing to find, and not also such a simple thing to define which therapist is right for you. But it's a matter of some intellectual research, which now is easier and easier, of course, with AI, but then a gut feeling. Does it feel like I'm at home? Are there any alarm bells whatsoever about this therapist and other things? So that's, I must admit, I haven't done that a great deal in the recent years, but during the cycle, I did a couple of dozen sessions, and it was positive, and I can recommend it as well. What made a big mark for me was to go to an Ayurvedic treatment for 2 weeks, where the body basically gets cleansed. And these type of treatments are available. I think it's called Panchakarma. It's based on Ayurvedic science from, I think it's from India. Concept is to prevent illness rather than fix it. Whereas the clinical medicine is often focused on fixing the issue when there is already a visual manifestation of illness, like a disease or cancer or something. The Ayurvedic tradition tries to prevent those from happening. And the way they do it is to purify basically your digestive system from toxins and your body from toxins. And it's like a intense detoxification, where then you notice actually physically and vividly that stress lives in your tissues as well as in your mind. And when those tissues are being purified and released, you get intense stress release, which can come across as many days of negative emotions in a row, and then suddenly there's this deep light and serenity that comes to your life, and it lasts for many months. They recommend to do it periodically, once a year or once 2 years, and obviously that's also in modern life. The cost and the time inhibition to do it 2 weeks is very challenging, but it's worth it, especially if you are going through something like this and you want to try everything. I highly recommend it. And then afterwards you can find ways to, which I've done because I'm very pressed on time. Often I have to be very selective with, and there's no way I can do 2 weeks of this every year. So you can do like periodic cleanses with fasting for a few days, but whatever works for your system. You need to kind of figure it out for yourself. What is your nervous system and what's your digestive system like, and your mind, and what do you prefer, what do you like, and what works for you as well, because it doesn't work for everyone the same way, or some people view it differently at least. So periodic fasting or intermittent fasting, and just paying attention to diet on daily basis, eating clean and trying to avoid too much fat and sugar and all the stimulants. Again, saying the same thing, live in a healthy way. It's obvious, yeah, duh. But like it can be a great substitute, and then maybe every few years you go there. It's if you have a sensitive nervous system and you are pressed in time and you live with a lot of stress and need to take it out from your body, and believe that stress long term in your body, if not unleashed, can cause severe illness. If you have unresolved emotions, if you have unresolved stress, I believe that those will cause significant illnesses like cancers and other things in long term, if not dealt with. And this is not medical advice, by the way. Maybe I should have said that in the beginning, but my personal opinion based on experiences in life. I think there's also quite a lot of corresponding or corroborating evidence to that. And then you can explore different types of energetic work like Reiki or other, to work on your energy body without going too woo woo. But that's also important that your energetic, if you believe in chakras, that the energies flow well and that your chakras are open, your energy centers in your body, and that it's that's a whole different area of depth that can also impact, if not attended to and have issues there. Everything else may seem fine on the surface, but then if you're energetically stuck, you may have all kinds of issues, including sleeping issues in your life. So it took me from 2008 January to 2012 January, more or less, to go through the crisis period, if you will, of this phenomenon called insomnia, during which I tried and tested the things that I've mentioned, and probably many others that I've since forgotten or weren't so impactful. But looking back now, how do I hold the term insomnia versus when it began? Back then, I used to believe that it was a misfortunate event, that there's something wrong with me, and that it's going to significantly deteriorate my life if I don't solve it. Nowadays, I believe that it was perhaps the biggest blessing that life has given me, because it invited me to investigate inward and discover that perhaps peace and happiness does not live outside of you in material objects, but it lives within. That hypothesis I buy stronger and stronger the more years I have seen, and that's perhaps been the biggest driver, biggest change in looking at the insomnia in long term. So seeing it as an ultimate negative to see it as a greatest teacher. Having said that, couple of caveats. I would not want to go through that again, and I definitely wouldn't wish it upon anybody. But since it happened, I feel like it was a great blessing for my life, and I'm very grateful that I had this. I kept going. I didn't give up at any point, and just accept the belief that something is wrong with me and that I can't not sleep. And I also want to mention to this, the other belief I had was that it's not possible to have a happy and successful life if you are not sleeping. Whatever you define as success, by the way, is completely subjective. I now believe that regardless of the quality of my sleep, I can have the life of my own terms, because this too will pass. Everything will change and everything will end. And even if you don't sleep for a long period of time, you've got tremendous amount of power in your spirit, in your body, in your mind. If you focus on it and if you harness it, keep going, don't give up, you can absolutely live the fullest of life, even if you struggle greatly with sleep. And that was perhaps one major takeaway as well from this, which also gives me, because sometimes if life gets really intensely stressful, like anybody, there's moments when lie awake late at night with fear upon you. And what is fear really? It's false evidence that appears real. I think Tony Robbins defined it that way. It's just a mental concept of future that you, with your negative bias in your brain, often imagine much worse than is ever going to take place. And then your nervous system responds to it. So it has also given me a different way to look at fear and not believe it, even though my brain sometimes presents it and nervous system in a very, very convincing way. I often find myself being able to let go, and that the belief that you can choose the meaning that you give to things, and your whole life is not the life you experience, but the life that you focus on. And this insomnia challenge was a great pathway to it. I really sympathize with you if you are experiencing sleeping challenges, and sending you all the love and positivity and strength and stamina to get through it. I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for listening. This is The Deep End.